So you'd So you'd figure like 5 years into a system's life.
You can't live forever.
So you'd figure like 5 years into a system's life that the demand for it would have fallen off by now. But the Switch just keeps on going. And we had some recent sales information shared with us, and I'm to the point now where it's pretty obvious we're part currently of a historic generation for a console with its sales, and it's certainly something that none of us saw coming. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first off, let me go over here. This is the dedicated unit, video game unit sales, and we had this information updated this previous week when Nintendo shared the results of this most recent fiscal year that ended March 31st. So right now we're in their next fiscal year. That would be fiscal year 2023, and that will be running until the end of March 31st, 2023. Now, we're going to come back to that because Nintendo did issue their forecast and how many Switch systems they believe they will sell by then. But we can see here 107.65 million units have sold for the Switch and 822 million units for software. Both those numbers are very impressive. by then, but we can see here 107.65 million units have sold for the Switch and 822 million units for software. Both those numbers are very impressive. Obviously, you see it next to the 3DS, that's 75 million, and less than half in terms of software for the Switch. And I mean, the Wii U, the poor Wii U, there it is with 103 million units of software, once again, less than the hardware for the Switch. But the two systems that people are really comparing it to right now, where the Wii, after it has passed that, it still needs to work up to that software number, but it seems pretty obvious it's going to get there. But the DS, 154 million units of hardware, 948 million units of software. This is all the way around Nintendo's best selling system, hardware and software. But I mean, look where the Switch is right now, 107 and then 822. It's coming up on it pretty quick. Now, we also did have some information shared with us this week when it comes to the NPD sales in the US. This being updated for last month, that would have been April. And we had an interesting statistic shared with us for the Switch, in that in the US, the Switch has now passed the PlayStation 4 when it comes to overall units sold. Say the Switch did lead the month in unit sales, and the NPD says it has now passed the Sony's PlayStation 4 in terms of lifetime sales in the US. Basically, the way that the NPD tracks is through revenue, or just dollars spent. But they do still keep tabs on the Switch when it comes to the number of systems sold, because the Switch does sell cheaper than the PS5 or the Xbox Series. Remember, there's a Switch Lite thrown in there at $200, and then the current Switch, $300, the Redbox one, then there's OLED at $350. So there's a bit of a spread when it comes to the dollars generated from those sales versus a $300, a $400, or a $500 system on the other side with the Series S, X, digital PS5, and regular PlayStation 5. Now, it's still trailing the PS2, the Xbox 360, and the Wii. The 360 was actually very popular in the US, and so was the Wii. And obviously, the PS2 comes up in any sales conversation, because it's the best selling home console of all time. It's up there with the DS. So the DS being where it is as a handheld, versus the PS2 as a console, I still look at the PS2 as being the most impressive system when it comes to its overall sales, because as we know, and we're seeing this effect with the Switch, households will tend to own multiples of handhelds. And the Switch, I mean, there's a Switch Lite thrown in there that I'm sure has been purchased many.
Will you be my freeze? New Mike's Hard Freeze. All the flavor without the brain freeze.
Times by the same family. Now, we are at a very interesting point with the Switch in its life currently, and I think the next 2 years are really going to tell us if the Switch is going to make that run and become the best-selling system of all time. It's a very possible scenario, and actually likely, unless Nintendo kind of Nintendo's and just veers off the path completely, just takes a massive left turn or something. But if we look at the Wii, it got off to a fast start. If you remember, the Wii was impossible to find when it first came out. It was for like 2 years. It was just the demand was super high. And eventually Nintendo got the production all figured out. And they did produce 26 million Wii systems during the 2009 fiscal year. Afterwards, though, it did continue to fall by about 5 million. And then eventually by like 2011, going to 2012, I mean, it was pretty much the Wii had tapered off completely. It did eventually kind of limp past the 100 million unit mark, whereas the Switch just crashed right through it. And we have heard talks that Nintendo could be doing a revision of some kind. Nintendo themselves didn't seem interested in commenting on if there is new hardware coming out this current fiscal year. I think right now with the chip shortage, even if Nintendo wanted to come out with a new system, they're still not 100% sure if they can, say, make the holiday deadline based on what we're seeing with part availability across the board. But right in this time period, fiscal year 2010, 2011, this is where Nintendo should have been able to adapt to the changing marketplace and come out with a Wii HD rather than try to move to the Wii U in late 2012. Clearly, that was not a great idea there. I think they could have extended the Wii's life, and rather than have this massive drop-off between this fiscal year and then 2012's fiscal year, they could have had a Wii HD and maybe extended it into 2013 potentially. A lot of it came down to the fact that there was heavy adoption when it came to HDMI-equipped sets, and we even saw like the 360, of course. Start to do things like add the HDMI port with that Elite a few years prior, and the PS3 had it from the start, but it was very clear people were moving up to those kind of TVs, and the Wii just wasn't really set up for it. The best you were going to do then was get component cables for it, or find one of those like off-brand third-party HDMI adapters. Which finally brings me to this list here. It's the best-selling consoles of all time. PS2 obviously at the top, 155 million. The DS right behind it, 154 million. The PS2 and the DS is a time period that I didn't think we'd ever be able to replicate with another system. Certainly the PS2 when it comes to home consoles, because even now, Sony, the PS4 was a roaring success for them. The Xbox One just never competed. It was always well behind it. But even that seems to be kind of capping off at like 117 or 118 million. And like I said, they just ran away with it. Reminds me very much of the PlayStation 2 when that just completely ran away with the generation. And it had two competing systems. Nintendo likes to be off on their own, like with the Wii U and all of this. But like the GameCube and the Xbox were like, hey, we're powerful. We have this dedicated lineup of games. Microsoft's making all these deals, throwing money around. But Sony came out with the PS2 when Sega was exiting, and they had just accrued a ton of third-party support from the previous generation when they broke onto the scene with that PlayStation, showing that, yes, they could easily push around Nintendo in that home console market. But the PS2 also played DVDs, and there are a lot of people who bought a PlayStation 2 just for the DVD aspect. I mean, that was a big shift in multimedia, going from VHS tapes to DVDs, and for a lot of people, hey, just pick up a PS2 and you're covered. The DS being the other one that I didn't think we'd ever replicate, and technically the Switch covers both bases, right? Whether it's home console or a portable system. And the DS came about when cell phones weren't like completely there with how smartphones are now, where basically everyone has one and you can just take that out of your pocket. If you have to kill like 10 or 15 minutes with a slew of free to play games you can just grab off the App Store in like a couple of seconds. At that time, it was much more of a common thing to walk around with a DS basically everywhere, and it was set up with that in mind, not like the PSP, which was much more delicate and you were a bit more concerned about it getting damaged, even putting it in your bag. The DS, it was clamshell, folded closed, and it didn't have like the load times or anything. It was very quick. Pick up and play for a couple of minutes, close it, and just put it away, and you're off and running. So to see the Switch here, 107.65 million, a little less than 10 million behind the PlayStation 4. That's overall worldwide. While it has passed it in the US, easily passed it in Japan, still places like Europe, the PlayStation 4, very popular there. But Nintendo has projected 21 million Switch systems to sell in this current fiscal year, which means by the end of March 2023, we would see the Switch running up to about 130 million units, which would put it above the PlayStation 4, the Game Boy, and the Game Boy Color. And I mean, right behind the DS and the PlayStation 2. They'd be like one big fiscal year, or maybe two standard fiscal years, away from passing both of those systems and becoming the best-selling console handheld.
Buenos dias, all! RGT85 here. Hope everyone's having a great start to your weekend. Mine has been cleaning bird feces off my car because every morning there's more bird feces and I clean it, and then there's more bird feces the next morning. I somehow feel that Review Tech USA is behind this, but you're not here to hear about my fecal problems. You are here to hear about video game news, couple stories going on that I want to cover. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. If you really enjoyed the video, hit the bell thing too. And without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. And we're going to start with talk about one of my favorite companies, and that is, of course, Sega. Now, I'm someone who grew up on Sega. I have a lot of love for old school Sega, and the current Sega, like, it's not great. Like, there's a lot more that they could be doing. There's a lot more things that they should be focused on rather than what they are indeed focused on, trying to get into this metaverse nonsense. Like, focus on quality games and then worry about that stuff. I, of course, made a detailed video about how to make money if you are Sega. Just my opinion. Obviously, I don't expect a huge company to listen to some idiot like me, but I just wanted to get that information out there because I thought it was a fun topic. Well, Sega had their financial report briefing the other day, and they actually said something very interesting that a lot of people are starting to talk about, so I kind of want to go over this information with you guys as well. So basically what Sega said was the core strategies of the new medium-term plan center around digging deeper into key existing IPs like Sonic, Phantasy Star, Yakuza, Persona, and Total War, and offering these to global markets. We're also taking up the challenge of super games within 5 years. Also, given our large pool of IPs that have enjoyed strong global recognition, we will actively leverage past IPs and further develop them. That is, by means of remasters, remakes, reboots, etc. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff to unravel with that. I feel like two of their best franchises right now are indeed Yakuza and Persona in terms of sales. So that's good that they are, you know, sort of focusing on those. The super games thing, I don't like it. Like, I don't know. It just seems like an absolute waste of money, and it's not a risk that I feel like Sega should be taking at this point in time, because the whole point of it is you need to be making money to be making better video games. But of course, the last bit of information is arguably the most interesting, because they're talking about leveraging old IPs, because look at Sega's IP list. They have quite a few of them that have been dormant for a while, and doing things like remasters, reboots, remakes, so on and so forth. And on the surface level, I absolutely love this. This is exactly what Sega fans want. We want to see things like this. And of course, this information is saying that these things will be happening before March of 2023. So is Sega working on a bunch of reboots and remasters and fun things for video game fans, especially from the Sega era? I want to believe that they are doing that. I want to believe that that's their goal, that's their mission with this, but there's a problem. And the problem is, I feel like I've talked about this before with Sega saying in things like these financial reports that, yeah, we're going to do remasters and reboots and remakes and stuff. It seems like every year they say the same thing, but what ends up happening is nothing. Like, are we counting Sonic Origins as this? Is this your big reboot, your big remake, remaster? Like, I just feel like Sega says this all the time. They are constantly saying that.
I was actually going to avoid this topic because it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't hot topic, but you know what?